the basic disease model of spreading basically assumes that a relationship between a person is basically like a pipe. It's, a conduit for me to spread COVID-19 to you, and then you spread it to other people, or for me to give you a piece of information and you to tell somebody else. And what we've realized is that when we start to look at the way behaviors spread in social networks, the relationships between people aren't just pipes, aren't just conduits for, someone adopts a certain diet and then someone else adopts it. The relationships around us are also these prisms that kind of refract and color the behaviors we see and determine whether or not we think it's like a good idea or a bad idea, and how those influences ultimately shape our capacity to adopt and how we get folded into that next step in the process of influencing the people around us, and also the influences of our neighbors and near neighbors combine with us to sort of create a bigger picture for sort of the people who are observing our behavior. And so the fact that networks are doing this work that isn't just like disease propagation, but it's also shaping how we think and how we feel about the things we see around us is really this process of complex contagion, where the invisible structure and ultimately what's interesting is like the geometry of the social networks we're embedded in is kind of controlling our sort of our receptivity to new ideas and how we ultimately transmit those ideas to other people. And so the simplest way of talking about this is just to say, well, look, if someone is infected with a highly virulent disease like, COVID-19 or measles, and you come into contact with them, then under the right circumstances, that'll spread to you and to other people. You don't need to know anything or to think anything or to believe anything. That will just kind of happen by itself. And that's the kind of one-to-one model of disease transmission. All you need is to come in contact with one person and you can get sick. Of course, for behavior change, oftentimes if someone comes in with a new idea, let's say someone's wearing a face mask, but no one else is wearing a face mask, that one person stands in opposition to all the implicit influences around you. So those people, even though they're not actively doing anything, are providing kind of a social norm, which is saying, we don't really wear face masks, and this one person wearing a face mask is doing something different. So instead of that person being a source of transmission, like someone infected with the measles would be, that person is actually maybe a source of opposition, which is they're doing something different than everybody else. I'm going to ignore everything that person does because they're sort of odd and deviating from the social norms. But now what happens when 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 people in your social network start to wear masks? There's a shift in social expectations where all of a sudden it's not just that one person adopting that behavior. It starts to feel like everyone, and we stop counting the specific individuals adopting a behavior, and it starts to feel like just a group movement. And now all of a sudden it feels normal, natural, and the social expectations shift where we feel like this is something we should do too. It turns out that this process of reinforcement, which is complex contagion, plays an enormous role in every social movement we've seen, from Arab Spring to Black Lives Matter, even back to the civil rights movement, the protests to the Berlin Wall, but also in things like the spread of the acceptance of solar panels and solar energy for household power, and even the growth of acceptance of farming technologies in Europe and in the US. And so one of the big sort of ideas here is that the viral model that describes sort of things spreading from person to person through pipes doesn't capture at all the process of real behavior change and how it cascades through networks. Now, the deep insight is that the geometry, the sort of network pathways that allow a virus to spread effectively, are pathways that really won't be very effective for spreading behavior. It turns out that the geometries that are really effective for creating that kind of reinforcement from multiple sources and kind of shifting the social norms in a community, those networks aren't very effective for spreading viruses, but they're really powerful for spreading behavior change. And so this actually tells us that the science of behavior change really should go in a different direction. And this is some of the more powerful stuff we found out empirically with some of the experiments, is that you can generate predictions that show that the exact same network that would accelerate the spread of a virus or accelerate information spreading actually slows down the spread of behavior change. And this is where you can see like a really new direction and path for the science of social change.